you mentioned music stories. My favorite one. I can't let it go.
Don't.
When I was working at the Gainesville Sun,
Welcome to Marion County Voices, a production of the Marion Forum Group podcast. I'm Bob Raymer, and I'll be your host. I'd like to introduce the first in a series of episodes to be called Solo Session, Talking Marion County. It's an opportunity to speak with individuals with a connection to Ocala and Marion County about their background, their interests, and the efforts on the local scene. Today, we have a chance to talk with a Marion County resident, writer, and author who has had this community in his sights for decades. Dave Schlenker, welcome.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
Dave Schlenker is a longtime newspaper and magazine columnist who escaped newsroom layoffs in 2019 to become a public engagement manager for a large utilities company. He's now a writer and photographer for the College of Engineering at the University of Florida, where he hangs out with robot dogs, food desiccators, and really smart people. He holds degrees in photography and journalism, wrote the books Little Man, Big Mouth, 30 Years, and Columns, Confessions, and a Brain Cyst. He's a volunteer photographer for the Ocala Civic Theater, Lyrics for Life, and Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. Did I miss anything there, Dave?
There's a few other. I can't keep up with my own schedule, Bob. That sounds great.
Okay. I'd like to bring your attention to these two books that I mentioned here. We have those here, and
cool.
They're available. And what I'd like to ask, Dave, is what has over 30 years of living and working in Marion County as a writer taught you?
It's taught me there's always something to write about in Marion County. That's for sure. It's an inspirational county on several levels. I mean, it's pretty, it's nice. There's just good, funny, good-hearted people that run throughout the city. And this is my home. This is where I grew up. I mean, I've got, working in a newspaper gives you a lot of stories. You're in front of a lot of people. You're out doing a lot of different things. I mean, that's your job is to report on the unusual. That's what they call it, news, and so, it's just, you never run out of things to write about here. So, and that's not a bad thing. Sometimes when you say that about Florida, it's like, oh, gosh.
Unfortunately, you never run out of things to talk about. And I know you got stories which you certainly cover in your books and your columns, and also as working the desks here at the various newspapers. But I'd like to start a little earlier than that, believe it or not. I know that you relocated here with your family at a young age. And what do you recall of those memories that stick when you first arrived in Marion County?
My family moved here from St. Pete in the late 70s. And my stepfather, my mom had gotten remarried. My stepfather was an insurance agent. Well, he was an adjuster, and then he got a job as an insurance agent in town. And that's why we moved up here. And so I remember probably a week or two after we got here, and my sister and I, we got up and we got to Ocala and we're like, where's the beach? This is a small town. We're used to St. Pete, we're used to the water, and we're a little confused. And so one day my stepfather says, you know what, let's just go take a drive. Let's just explore a new city. I said, okay. So we're driving in the family Datsun 510, 75 Datsun. I forget what year, it was in the 70s. And driving down Silver Springs Boulevard, heading east, we passed Silver Springs, and we happened to look over to our right, and there's an emu just booking it down the road, alongside the road. I mean, just right down 40, and we just look at it, and then we kind of look at it again, and no one really says anything at first because we're thinking, I guess this just happens in Ocala. I get that's our squirrels. I didn't know, and so that's kind of how I got introduced. Is I just thought, well, emus just run loose all over. Of course, he had jumped the fence. I guess in Silver Springs at the time they'd had emus and all kinds of exotic animals there. But that was the first time that I thought this place is a little different.
And as it turns out, I believe they still raise emus here in Ocala.
Yeah, there's still some areas that they raise the emus. Yeah, they're no longer at Silver Springs, but I think you can if you looked hard enough and you needed an emu bob, I'm sure you can find. I can hook you up with one somewhere.
That's
in Marion
great to
County.
know. I could only imagine when you first saw that with
Some
you and your
underground
family.
emu dealers that they can get you to. Yeah.
To see that is like the equivalent of watching a dinosaur come out of nowhere and go, oh, well, they have those here. Huh?
Well, I clearly remember as a kid, it was just like there was 4 of us, and none of us really. It was all kind of like, are we really seeing what we're seeing, and what are we seeing really?
Well, as you continue to drive around, and obviously between school and making new friends and that, what other things did you discover that you suddenly said, well, this is pretty interesting. This is a little different too.
I remember six-gun territory when I was a little kid. And I remember it even when I was in St. Pete. That's what I knew Ocala as, is the home of Silver Springs and six-gun territory. I didn't know anything else about it. I didn't know it was the emu capital of the world, the horse capital of the world. I just knew Silver Springs. And so that was a lot of fun. We went there a lot, six-gun territory when I was a kid. And just growing up, just the one thing I regret that I wish I would have done more as a kid in Marion County is take part in the equine community. I didn't ride a horse until I was probably 30-something years old, and that was just because I realized I lived in Ocala and I'd never ridden a horse. And so I wrote a column about my first time on a horse, and I got on. It was 2 minutes later, it started raining, so that was it. And I think that was the last time I was ever on a horse.
Sounds pretty successful.
But I successfully rode it for 2 minutes.
That's correct. I think in the rodeo, that's considered a win.
Exactly. Yeah, 2 minutes better than 8 seconds, for sure.
Well, now, as you start to absorb all of this, there's obviously some impulse to start to capture this somehow, to communicate that. You know what I'm circling around here. At some point you say, I think I'd like to write some of this down.
When I was a kid, I wanted nothing more to get out. I wasn't thinking of chronicling the life and times of Marion County as a teenager. I was very interested in doing that in a bigger city. I went to UCF in Orlando and loved it. And I ended up here because my wife ended up here. My wife's an actual native. Her dad, and that has given me a lot of grounding. Her father was the county extension agent here for 30-something years, and her mom taught just about every kid in this town. And, it's a very well-rooted family. Amy was born in Monroe, now Advent, and both of our daughters were born in Monroe, and so that meant quite a bit. But I wasn't until I moved back and started working for the newspaper when I kind of really started to gain perspective on the storytelling aspect of Ocala, and I kind of had a unique point of view just growing up here, and not only growing up here, but having the opportunity to see it as an outsider, even as a kid with the emus. That was. It was new to me. I got to see it as a new with new eyes, and I was old enough, I think, to not at the time not really appreciate it, but to understand this place is a little different, so to speak.
Which is grist for the mill for sure.
Yeah.
But just to note that you went to get your degrees, and you got a degree in photography.
Right.
And in journalism. Correct. So you were pretty much on the road to being a writer, a storyteller, an image maker.
My degree was in journalism, and that's what I did through the newspapers. And back in 2006, 2007, when the paint on the walls in newsrooms were starting to crumble a little bit, and I thought, you know what, I need another low-paying degree is what I need. So I was going to go get my master's, and I was actually interviewing. I talked to UF, and I was going to UCF, and I think I was coming from an interview from UCF. I was going to get my master's in mass comm, and it kind of hit me at that time when the newspaper, the industry was really starting to crumble, and I thought, well, I'd be preparing young journalists to go into an industry that was crumbling. I would feel like General Custer at the time, and I. Preparing for battle, and it kind of hit me. I'm just like, well, what else do I like to do? I've always loved taking photos, and I went straight from UCF to Daytona State College. A buddy of mine, Doug Engel, who worked at the Star-Banner with me for decades, he went there, and it's just a wonderful photography school. They house it's the Southeast Center for Photographic Studies there at Daytona State College, and so I got my photo degree about 20 years, almost to the month of when I got my journalism degree. I was in my 40s when I got my photo degree.
Wow.
So that was 2010. I've been taking pictures professionally ever since.
Excuse me, I've got to ask, too,
Yeah.
that photography has gone through such a transition.
It has, yeah.
And I was going to say, at what point did you have to follow that transition from, oh, I've got all these darkroom techniques that I no longer can use? You could use.
Well, you
but
know
obviously.
what? Here's the thing. And one thing that I really liked about Daytona State was that they started you in film. I was well into the digital age by the time I started photo
Gotcha.
school. And my first day in class, they said, go get yourself, if you don't have one already, a manual SLR 35 millimeter camera, film camera. And so I think to this day, they still incorporate film. And that's a really good strategy because, the new age of photography with digital photography, everybody's a photographer.
Correct.
Whether it's with your phone or with your camera, but the frames are, you're more apt to throw things away. You shoot a lot of shots that aren't going to be used because you're not burning film. You're not burning, and you don't have that 12 pack or that 30 pack or whatever it is the film used to come into, and so you conserve your shots. You frame your shots a lot clearer. You make best use as you can of the process of the framing of the composition. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. My wife didn't like me coming home smelling like Fixer every
I'm sure
couple times a week, and I still shoot film. I love film. I have probably my biggest hobby is collecting old film cameras. I restore some of them, and I shoot a lot of film. We went to Europe on vacation last summer, and the only camera I took was a twin lens reflex medium format film camera. And I shot the heck out of that thing, and all my vacation photos were film. So,
well, just to follow up, because you've given me a little bit of information prior to our talking about the fact that at some point you're going to gather your photography together, and you may have a book coming up.
I'm hoping to. Every now and then, I've been taking photos for so long in Marion County, even before I went to photo school, and I have not only stacks and stacks of film, but I also have just hard drive after hard drive after hard drive, through the years that you put them together, it's a little tower. And so I go through and I try to archive and organize a little bit. And it hit me not long ago. I'm just like, some of these really frame Marion County. I mean, I've been photographing festivals and, games and just street photography and just... I do a lot of weddings and stuff, and my favorite part of any wedding is the reception. I just love watching people let their guard down. There's a cast of characters that happens with every wedding reception. There's always the shy, sweet aunt that, by the end of it, she's going to be liquored up and dancing on the dance floor. And, you got the little kid that's the ring bearer that's suddenly becoming the center of attention. Yeah. And, it's just, I love photographing receptions. It's just, that's kind of where the joy in the weddings in the community come out. And so, so I'm starting to organize all this and starting to put them into groups. And ideally what I'd like to do is the next couple of years is do a photo book, kind of a candid Ocala with just some short essays for each photo and, some context and, So I've had some support on it. I've kind of floated some images on Facebook and floated the idea. I ran into Kent Gwynn, our former mayor, last night, in fact, and he was really excited about it. Of course, I've got photos of him, so he's really excited about it. Of course. Yeah.
And while you mentioned it, though, you have a page on Facebook, too, where
I do, yes.
Okay, so for those that are interested in seeing maybe a preview of this, that's a good place to go.
Dave Schlenker Photography has 2 Facebook pages, my own, and then Dave Schlenker Photography is where you can see a lot of the work that's probably going to end up in the book.
Okay, well, we'd like to make sure people get that out there.
Okay.
And we also will follow up on it because at some point we'd like to know more about it.
Yeah, keep after me, Bob. That's
Well, I will. I absolutely will. Going back to the business of writing, which we've touched on a couple of times already, because everyone can choose to write, but writing professionally means getting paid. You experienced some real challenges when you realized that the newspaper business itself was contracting. I guess that's a nice way to put it.
I think that's a nice word,
Yeah, and obviously you saw the writing on the wall. Tell me a little bit about how you dealt with that, because I'm sure that this was common for a lot of people who were in that business.
I am a very positive person, I think, to a fault. So it took me a long time to see the writing on the wall that other people were seeing. I didn't realize how bad things were getting until they were really bad, until, I was losing colleagues left and right. And, so I started looking for jobs, and not real seriously, just thinking, I probably ought to get something one day, because I'm not seeing this as a secure landing spot as I once did. And I got a job with Duke Energy back in 2019. Very good job. They treated me very well. And I would have been laid off from the Star-Banner 3 weeks. The day I started with Duke, 3 weeks later, they laid off everybody on my level. And so I got out just in time. I was very, very lucky.
You made that lily pad.
Boy, oh boy. And as I say, I had a good 5 years at Duke. It taught me a lot. It really prepared me for the next phase of my life. And then, but it also allowed me to write. After that, I had some nice offers from some of the magazines, and so I wrote. Yeah,
you're not on a daily deadline now.
No.
You're really
I'm on a monthly deadline, although I still struggle with that. I think my editors are wondering where my column is at this very second.
It's coming.
It is coming. It really is. So I work for Ocala Style magazine. Again, those are that publication has a lot of folks that I worked with prior, had a lot of respect for. Same thing with Ocala magazine. I'm now writing a lot for them. So yeah, I just liked it. I like the monthly pace of it. I get to write the column the way I like to write it. Ocala magazine has a really nice display for the column, a nice package. They give it kind of a fun, almost Monty Python-ish graphic treatment for the magazine. So that's a lot of fun. I just like working with creative people, and they do a really nice job with the presentation of the column. So
and there are checks that come along with that. So that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. Do a little spending money here and there, and good people with both magazines, and Ocala's blessed to have some. They've got 2 newspapers. They've got 3 city magazines. I'm also doing a little work for Ocala's Good Life. That's a nice magazine that caters to the retired community. So I do some stuff with them. Just good. There's a lot of good journalists that still float around town.
Yeah, and there's opportunities there,
yes.
which is the key. I can imagine that the relief you must have had when after leaving the working for the newspaper and enjoying that work, but knowing that doesn't feed the baby.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about things important to anyone that's over the age of 30, now I'll make that over 20, retirement, 401k, anything like that, that you found a really good opportunity, and you continue to do so.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about the College of Engineering at the University of Florida.
That's a fun place.
I guess so.
That's a really fun place, and I literally consider myself rescued. After when I left Duke, there was a pretty nervous 3 months of unemployment there, and I realized that maybe I should have gotten that master's after all. But a dear friend of mine who I'd worked with prior, I'd covered her. She'd done a lot of things. I'm going to say her name, Tina Banner. She worked with United Way, very well respected around Marion County. And she called me up. She says, "Hey, I'm now working with the College of Engineering, and we need a writer." And the heavens just opened up, and it's a lot of fun because basically I'm writing about cool stuff. That's what engineers do. And UF is a premier research university, so they're constantly producing just really not fun stuff, but also really relevant.
Well, the innovation is all over the place.
Yeah, like the medical breakthroughs they're doing. There's a lot of stuff there that they talk about that's just 6,000 feet over my head, and I really have to have them slow down a bit for it. But they have the robot dogs. I keep referring to that, but that's just the fun stuff.
That's cool. Yeah.
They've got.
Well, let me ask you
Yeah.
about the food desiccators.
Okay, there you
because
go.
I want everyone to understand what a food desiccator is and how valuable it can be to your daily diet, I guess.
A desiccator is, and I just found this out because I just wrote a story about the student group that actually produced a very large and very well constructed food desiccator. And what a food desiccator is it takes moisture out of food. It's like for food processing. For example, when I went to actually photograph the product that the UF students had made, they had macadamia nuts in there, and they were basically drying them out.
Okay.
And that's what that's for. And the product is used in their food science departments. But what they did is they hired these UF engineering students. They're in this program that they make products. They take 2 semesters to design products. These companies come to them. One example would be Florida Power and Light. They come to this program, 2-semester engineering program, and they say, you know what we need? We want something that's going to help us be safer when we do utility work on the side of the road.
Absolutely.
So this group of students came up with like this traffic alert system, which was great. The food science department says, hey, we need a desiccator. The one that we got in this room doesn't work. Students physically made this desiccator. They do. It's just fascinating, and you feel very intimidated at times because not only are the professors there, they got 600 PhDs each, and talk at a level that you'll never talk at, but the students themselves just blow you away. I mean, these. I want to say kids. They're not kids. They're 25-year-old young adults that, But it's just fun to see it's fun to be in an academic atmosphere for
sure.
one. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm a big Gator fan now. I was a Gator fan before. UCF is my passion. But I
you can hold those two together. I think.
I can. And I've got one daughter that went to UF and another's at UCF, and then so I have to be careful on which flags I fly on what day they're visiting. So
the dual shirt or something like that.
Yep.
But that's fascinating because again, that's another hub of innovation.
Oh, yeah.
In this area.
Yeah.
That impacts us.
Sure.
Yeah. And frankly, like you said, there's always news coming out of that.
Yeah, and they face real world problems, which is what I like. I mean, they're not just researching for the sake of researching and spending money. I mean, they have very tangible outcomes in what they do, and that's very neat to see.
Yeah.
So it's very neat to cover.
I'd like to pivot a little more again.
Okay.
Because I know that your writing has been influenced by music, not only you're as a musician, but also the appreciation of it. And guess what? Welcome to Florida. There's plenty of music here.
There is plenty of music.
You've maintained contact and relationship with the Gainesville band Sister Hazel.
Yep.
You've, according to your book, laughed with Tom Petty. And I'd like to draw out a couple more stories from you about how this has, how over the years you've enjoyed all of this.
Being in the newspaper business is always fun because you're doing different things. I've been very lucky in the sense that I've worked in features. My passion has always been music. You say I was a musician. I was a very poor musician. I gave up. I sold my sax after college for lunch money after a very poor paying newspaper job. But yeah, when you cover the arts and entertainment, I mean, in particular in Gainesville, I worked in Gainesville for about 4 years, and there's just a lot of music that comes through there. The Tom Petty story, I'd interviewed Tom a couple times on the phone, and I think one of the things that I'd interviewed him about were his TV appearances. And one of the TV appearances that we talked about, he was one of the voices for the animated series King of the Hill, which is one of my favorite shows. He plays Lucky, who is Luann's boyfriend, and he's got self-wealth because he slipped in a bathroom on pee-pee, and that's, just a funny character. And so Tom and I were laughing about that. And so that was just fun. But yeah, I've been you mentioned Sister Hazel. I keep in touch with them. They've been very supportive of my books. In fact, Lyrics for Life, one of the nonprofits that you had mentioned that I work for, that's a Sister Hazel charity. And next month, March 8th, in fact, they're having their big Lyrics for Life concert. And what that does is they raise money for pediatric cancer patients. They typically host a summer camp. It's like a weekend camp for these cancer patients and their families just to be kids. And so they bring these kids in and they get to canoe and kayak, and the band, the singer Ken Block, his brother passed away from cancer. So it's always been a very driving force for him. And they're very passionate about the cause. And so I started volunteering for that several years ago, and it's just very fulfilling. I love shooting music to begin with my camera, so that's always a good fit. And, I lost my mom to cancer. My wife is a 2-time breast cancer survivor. I mean, we've all had our run-ins with cancer, so anything we can do to make struggling families happier, that's what Lyrics for Life is all about, and I'm glad to be a part of that. So
yeah,
but you mentioned music stories. My favorite one. I can't let it go.
Don't.
When I was working at the Gainesville Sun, they had Stephen Stills come in to do. He actually was doing. It was like a speech and music. It wasn't actually a concert. He brought. It was kind of a Q&A, and he played some music. And Stephen has connections in Gainesville. He actually went to UF for a little bit, and he's got other connections too. And so he's in and out of Gainesville now and then. So I love Stephen Stills, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Who doesn't love all that stuff? And so when he was doing this performance in Gainesville, they said, "Oh, we're going to have a press conference before the show." I said, "Okay, this is perfect. We've been trying to get together with him, do an interview for the newspaper for a while now. This will be perfect." So I said, "I'm going to just show up early, see if I can get together with him, knock out the interview, and we're good to go." So I go to the hotel, and I walk in, and sure enough, there's Stephen Stills smoking a cigarette out in front of the hotel. Like, this is perfect. He's just kind of standing there, just chilling, kind of taking a breather. I'm like, this is perfect. So I go up to him. I'm like, "Hey, Mr. Stills, how you doing?" I put out my hand. Nothing. Keep smoking, just staring off in the distance. Okay, so I step in a little closer, and I said, "Mr. Stills, hey, I'm Dave Schlenker from the Gainesville Sun." I'm still nothing. And so I walk into the lobby, and I'm fuming. I'm like, Stephen Stills blew me off. I can't believe that, one of the main guys from the peace-loving generation is a jerk. And I'm just fuming at this point. I can't believe it. So we're sitting there with some of the other reporters, and the other reporters are much younger than I am. And their primary question to me was, who's Stephen Stills?
Yeah, well.
So sure enough, a few minutes later, Stephen Stills walks in with his publicist. And his publicist sits down, and he says, "All right, everybody, I need to tell you something." He says, "Stephen's been performing in front of very loud amplifiers for a long time. He's very, very hard of hearing. You have to get right in his face and talk to him with questions." He didn't hear me at all. That's what it was. So when I got right in his face and I talked to his questions, he was the Stephen Stills I knew and loved. And so you never take things at face value, and I think that's one thing I learned as a reporter is you always, there's always, rely on the second and third impression sometimes.
Yeah, key lesson there.
Key lessons. But that was my favorite. There for a while, I thought Stephen Stills was a jerk. And he just, bless his heart, he just couldn't hear me.
I'm glad he got redeemed here. For everyone who appreciates
he's
his
a wonderful
work.
guy, and, wonderful show. And I still love him. So.
Yeah, celebrity is tough. And I'm sure you'll be the first one to know that from some experiences with celebrities. Yeah. And you were also talking earlier too about some really serious issues that people deal with.
Yeah.
I'd like to continue on that for a little bit because there are moments that we all end up facing, or family or friends that really just kind of stop us in our tracks. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get back to your book here on columns, confessions, and a brain cyst. Mm-hmm. You mentioned an article in Ocala Style that in late 2023, you developed a tremor that was secondary to a brain cyst.
Correct.
And that left you unable to type.
Mm-hmm. That was a tough one. Yeah.
That's a tough one.
That was a tough one. I could type, but I could type pretty sloppily. Just the left hand just didn't have the strength. And what had happened was, I've had this brain cyst since I was born. It's just grown proportionally. I've had several surgeries for it. Okay. Everything's fine now. It's just, there's just symptoms you live with. And apparently one of the symptoms as I grow older is a little bit of a tremor. So that was scary because you think, well, what else could it be? So we had neurosurgeons, come in, and they determined they didn't want to go in for what would have been a fourth brain surgery. And so they were able to prescribe meds. The tremor is very much under control now, but that was scary. Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't just the typing, but I mean, my only other skill in life is photographing, and and I have big cameras, and I was at weddings, doing this number, and the brides are wondering why the wedding photos are shaky. So it was a big relief to get that under control.
Well, I just to take a moment on it, that at the time you were working at the university?
No, I was at Duke Energy at that time, yeah.
And in either way, this is something that needed to be addressed then. I mean, you had known over the years, but to what degree you could get the right medical diagnosis and get it help.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're thinking, well, so far today, I'm good.
Yeah.
But what's a month, a week out?
We keep tabs on it. I still have the tremor now and then. When UCF is losing, it gets worse.
Oh yeah, of course.
And just keeping an eye on it. I've got great doctors both here in Ocala, and there's some I see at UF as well. And I have complete faith in them. I mean, they got the tremor settled, and no one wants to crack me open and take another look at the brain, so I'm happy with that. And as I say, I'm a very positive, optimistic guy, I think, to a fault. I really don't think about, what it's going to be like in a few years, and I'm hoping it's going to be just like this in a few years,
Well, this is one instance where I think, an unrequited optimist is the best thing to be.
Oh, absolutely, and my wife, when I had the brain surgeries, and the first brain surgery was 2 months before we were married, for the wedding, and so I had a nice, lovely, scarred back, empty, shaved head for the wedding guests to see at the reception or at the wedding ceremony. But as I mentioned, my wife is a 2-time breast cancer survivor, and that trumps it all.
Absolutely.
And so I say that kind of in jest, but I mean, you know what I mean.
I know exactly.
I my situation tinkered with quality of life. Her situation tinkered with life itself,
right.
And it was very interesting because she showed me kind of really what it took to become a caregiver all those years, and I was able to kind of take that with through her illness, and she's fine now. She's doing great, but anytime I start whining about brain surgery, she's like, oh please.
Well, and with good reason. I just can appreciate that both of you with each other's help.
Oh yeah,
could get beyond this, and the quality of life is great. I'm just thrilled to hear that for both of you. And of course, you write about more of this too in there. So
I do. There's a picture of my cyst actually on the book cover. You can see how big it is. Yeah, that's the white part there.
Well, that's one of the more unusual.
It's bigger than my eyeball. How about that? I just realized that.
Wow.
Yep.
Boy, this has really been interesting. Back to writing for a bit.
Yes, sir.
Or maybe just back to career in general.
Okay.
What is some of the best advice you ever received when it came to your choice? Photography, writing, careers, life?
Yeah.
What do you think?
That's a good question. Writing, it took me a long time to get out of my own way for writing, I think. You read my books and my work, and it's very clearly that, Dave Barry was my guy. That's who I wanted to be. And, I wanted to make people laugh. I wanted to have that rhythm. I wanted to have that sensibility.
You got it.
But at the same time, I also needed to develop my own voice. And I learned, I got some very good advice from editors who said, don't be attached to a turn of a phrase. In other words, if you've got a very long piece and and it needs cutting, but there's a turn of a phrase that you're really hooked on, then you thought, oh, that's really clever, but it really doesn't belong in there, get rid of it.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck on, clever words. Get to what you need to get to, and then, you can add the clever words in at that point. But that I thought was just really good advice. Get out of your own way sometimes, and write what you know. I write, it's interesting. What I write at the University of Florida right now is so different than what I write for the magazines, And every now and then they cross paths. It was really funny because at the University of Florida, we have a service that detects anytime the University of Florida Engineering Department is mentioned or the College of Engineering is mentioned in the news. Well, I wrote a column about the layoff being hired at the University of Florida. And because the words College of Engineering, University of Florida were in there, it showed up in my work life. It showed up in the media report. Everybody's like, what the hell is this?
How did this fall in there?
Schlenker's writing about our scientific breakthroughs, and I don't know what he's writing about here. So
that's our digital world now.
That's exactly what it is. But the best advice for photography, and I think what I like to do, I like portraits, but the thing that I really like, and it gets back to the receptions and the weddings, is storytelling photographs. The way I photograph is a lot of times I'm not even looking through the camera. I've got my settings. I've got everything. I like motion. I like action. I want to see many faces. But in each photograph in that story, although people are doing different things, you got to pick out a star.
Yeah.
You got to find that one central person that's doing something that the world's revolving around. And that's what I look for now. And that's, I think, what's made my photography a lot better is finding stories with central characters and being able to recognize that as an image.
And I think for life, you've already kind of delineated some of those things after the challenges that you've surmounted, and you can pick them one in a row, and it seems like you grow from each of them.
Sure, yeah.
Thank goodness, because otherwise you're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah.
And here you are today, bigger and better than ever.
Well, I don't know about that. Bigger in this realm, maybe. But
again, that's the turn.
This is a podcast for the audio listeners. I was patting my belly. I just want you to.
What else would you like to talk about here? I mean, you've got so many.
How
stories
much time
here.
you got, Bob? No,
I got all the time you need.
Yeah.
But truly, there's as I was reading through your book, Little Man, Big Mouth.
Right.
There's just a ton of things, and I'm going to start on something you may not have expected. You were often talking about pranking your colleagues.
Yes.
And to the degree that which you can share that confidentiality, I wonder if you could describe what was going on in the newsroom among your colleagues, and maybe some of your best shots, because I'm fascinated to find out what you might have said.
Newspaper people in general are big on pranks. We're all cut from the same mold pretty much. We're very curious. We all, there's big hearts. We love chaos, but we're all cynical. We're a cynical lot. And I think it all started when I worked for the campus newspaper at University of Central Florida. There was two offices on campus. One was a mobile home, single wide mobile home. The other one was like a classroom portable, which is where the business office. And soon we realized that we could call one of the other offices, and as the phone was ringing, we could press a button, dial an outside line, hang up, and both of them would be ringing at the same time, and two very confused people would pick up the phones. So, of course, we took that to another level. I'd constantly call the business office and then ring one of the strip joints in Orlando, and so they were constantly, they were picking up the phone to the booby trap often, and so that was fun. But I that ended when my college roommate, who also worked at the newspaper, he was a very talented graphic designer, which you don't want to mess with graphic designers, and. So one day I came home. I was living with Scott at the time. We were rooming, and I came home, and there's this letter from the Orlando Sentinel. Like, same color bar, exact same logo, was even raised, I think, and it was very well written. Dear Dave, and I'd been trying to get an internship with the Sentinel for years at that point. And it says, Dear Dave, we found your resume again. We think we really have a nice spot for you. I appreciate you. Keep trying. My name is so-and-so. I work on the night desk. Please call me at night. That's when. So I was excited. I even called my mom. I'm like, Mom, I got this letter from the Sentinel. They want to hire me as an intern. I'm like, this is big. And my roommate's like, man, this is good stuff. This is great. Well, it turns out when I called the number, it was the Booby Trap. It was one of the strip joints in Orlando.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, I learned very quickly not to mess with graphic artists because they, their return pranks are very elaborate. They have the resources at their desk.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, in terms of escalating warfare, do you feel, compelled to, like, do them one better? Like,
at the Star-Banner, there was a big culture of pranks there, and I was a fairly active part of that. And I always, probably the main thing I would do, I think, is I sat near the main newsroom operator back when the newsroom had a main operator, and people would call in with what we'd call their big tomato stories. In other words, they'd call in with a news tip that they saw a UFO or whatever. I mean, some of them had validity, but 90% of the calls that come into a newsroom are stories that really aren't stories.
Yeah.
And so I would often, after we'd get one of those, and someone would call around and say, oh, that guy had a big tomato or he had a dancing pig or whatever it is that, they were offering up. So then I'd wait about 5 minutes and I'd call that same number from an outside line, and I'd have an even bigger dancing pig, or I'd be, a farmer from Pedro's, and so that went on. But again, that culture, you reap what you sow. The managing editor at that time, still a good friend of mine, he had a pretty wicked sense of humor. And I came in one time and everything on my entire desk was wrapped in clear packing tape. Every paper clip in the entire office was dumped on my floor. So it took me a while to undo that. That was pretty serious. I got him back by, I found an old nameplate from my college newspaper days. It said Dave Schlenker, managing editor. So when he was gone, I snuck into his office, replaced all of his stuff with my stuff, including my nameplate with my family photos. And then when he came back on, I said, oh, yeah, the publisher needs to see you.
That's pretty good.
So that went on. That's kind of the pace of life at newspapers.
You're
constantly trying to one-up each other.
It's almost heart attack inducing, in some cases. I did notice another phrase that you mentioned in your book where you were talking about the fireballs of death.
Fireballs of death.
And I was just wondering, for those that may not have heard of this term, you could explain it. And did you ever encounter a incident that was one of those fireballs of death?
Fireball of death comes from my friend Alan Youngblood, who was the longtime photo editor at the Star-Banner. And Alan still is, just got a very, very wicked sense of humor, but he also has a very interesting outlook on journalism and images and that. And, one of his true philosophies is, you got to spice things up. The New York Post is popular for a reason, And so he would always, that was his dream, to have a headline in the Star-Banner, Fireball of Death. So that was kind of always the gold standard on sensational stories as it rise to the Fireball of Death line. And I don't think we ever got a Fireball of Death story before he had left the newspaper industry. But that was...
that may be a good thing.
Yeah.
After all, it is a fireball of death.
I think maybe we're in the Fireball of Death phase right now.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Well, we need to keep alert for that.
We sure do, yeah.
Excuse me. But that's a great story, and that is sort of what you can expect with.
One day, Alan Youngblood's going to get his Fireball of Death. Hopefully, we'll all survive it, but he'll get his headline. That's what I'm hoping.
Dave, we can sum up a lot of things here. I'm trying to think what you might want to impart as we kind of wrap this up. And again, this is, what do you see in your future? Besides, we've talked about your pending book, and we've talked about a lot of things. Maybe it's not so much the future, but what you'd like to see in the future. Well,
I as for me, I'm going to keep on taking photographs and writing. I'm pretty short-sighted. I really don't see past the game tonight. I mean, Amy asked me what we wanted for dinner. I was on my way out, and I'm like, that's way ahead of me for there. That's too far ahead. I envision retiring at some point. Now that I kind of started my new job at 57, 56 years old, I think, I'm pushing that back a little bit. But, I see myself retiring and taking photos and writing when everybody wants me, when people want me to write. So.
Yeah, that doesn't really sound like retirement. It just sounds like
what I'm doing now, but it's on my deadline and not theirs.
Yeah, so you can extend it out a month or two longer.
Exactly. So that's Say I'm pretty short-sighted. I really see no grand plan. I'm a homebody. I love to, sit back and read and watch Netflix with my wife like everybody else, and I envision doing a lot of that in the future.
Well,
we're empty nesters now. It's nice. We eat dinner on the couch and go to bed at 9. It's a beautiful thing, and
it certainly is.
I'm hoping the future has a lot more of that.
Yeah, we want to encourage that.
Yeah.
Just again, thank you. And I'll try to wrap this up by saying, hearing from you, our family, friends, and neighbors, the people we live with, we work with, we celebrate with, and deal with day to day, can inform us about what is happening in Ocala and in surrounding Marion County. There's unique individuals out there with real stories that deserve highlighting. Mm-hmm. We will plan to bring further solo session episodes about Marion County residents, past, present, and possibly future, here with Marion Voices. Thank you, Dave Schlenker.
Thank you.
For taking the time to share some conversation as one of Marion County's most capable observers and storytellers. You can talk, and we appreciate it. We need to talk with you again.
Absolutely.
We want to engage you, our audience, engage with you. Please give us your comments and ideas on Marion Forum Group, one word, @gmail.com on this topic and other topics. You can also view this episode on YouTube at Marion Forum Group. Please hit the like button, leave your comments, subscribe, and share with others. Abedek, that's all for now.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
Loved
it was fun.
It was great.
Good.
Thanks for taking